Hey guys, in this video I'll show you all tank relevant changes that are coming with the update 44. This update arrives on 28th of October for PC and 13th of November for consoles, but we can already see what's coming thanks to the public test server. First we have a few changes for the Templar tank, though I can already tell you they're mostly irrelevant. Focus charge will now also taunt the enemy for 15 seconds. It provides major protection for 7 seconds instead of 4, and its cost has been increased from 3510 to 3780. The explosive charge morph, which is an AoE ability, will only taunt the first enemy hit, and it provides major protection for 15 seconds instead of 10. The toppling charge morph retains the old 3510 cost, but deals 3.3% less damage. And here's the developer comment. We're attempting to help Templar tanks feel a bit more zealous as they jump into battle by adding a taunt to this ability and its morphs. That doesn't help them in the slightest. Since these abilities don't really focus on damage, they've naturally been more beneficial for tanks to run, but didn't do enough to justify the bar slot. I mean, yeah, these abilities are utterly useless unless you need access to quick off balance for nuking dungeon bosses, but now scribing is just better for that. The added function of a taunt and extension of major protection will give another potential tool for how you wish to lead the charge as a tank, with a more class appropriate feel as you spread the light anywhere you go. This change doesn't do anything to help Templar tanks. It's still awful compared to other taunts like Pierce Armor or Destructive Clench, which provide either massive armor penetration or massive damage reduction for the entire team. Revealing Flare is a much better source of major protection that also grants you 10% magical recovery. And that nonsense about leading the charge, that's just not how you start pulls at all. It's just pure roleplay copium. This entire change is completely irrelevant for Templar tanks. This skill still isn't worth using. And the only thing it'll cause is that you'll sometimes have a clueless Skyrim player in your random dungeons, taking aggro away from you because they didn't read the skill's description. So, completely irrelevant change. On to the next ability. Sun Shield will now apply minor maim to all enemies hit for 10 seconds. The damage shield now increases by 10% with each enemy hit, rather than 4%. Its cost has been increased from 4320 to 4590. Radiant Ward Morph's shield value has been increased by 3.3%. But its cost has been increased from 4050 to 4320. Blazing Shield Morph's damage scales up to 33% of the damage shield, up from 30%. So let's see what they cooked up in the developer comment this time. In our ongoing crusade to improve the Templar tank experience, we're making some number tweaks on their primary defensive ability to make it feel punchier when used in the thick of a fight. 3.3% damage shield increase at the cost of 6.6% cost increase is what you call feeling punchier in the thick of a fight. Not even looking at Blazing Shield because it's still a useless dead morph. Minor Maim helps them potentially save a bar slot from another ability or source. No, it literally doesn't. In Trash you'll use Pulsar, which will apply Minor Maim anyway. In boss fights, one of the 1000 other abilities with Minor Maim will keep it up. Just look at any log and any boss fight. Minor Maim just isn't something you even consider when making team composition spreadsheets, cause it's such a prevalent debuff that DOS put on so many abilities that it ends up with 100% uptime even when nobody pays attention to keeping it up. While the increased base scaling reduces the variance in power on the morphs, to make sure both feel potent enough that you can dive into the front lines and survive for a few moments longer. Blazing Shield morph is still trash. It barely deals any damage, so Radiant Ward is still completely superior. Now that these abilities have much more density to them, we're also increasing the cost to match the standard other defensive abilities like it have. So, since Focus Charge and its morphs are still worthless, Blazing Shield is still worthless, all we ended up with is a 3.3% damage shield increase for Radiant Ward at the cost of 6.6% cost increase. I wouldn't really call that a crusade to improve the Templar tank experience. Next up we have Sorcerer tank. The healing of the Hardened Ward gets a well-deserved nerf. It will now heal you for 10% of your max HP, rather than 15%. There isn't anything funny in the dev comment this time. The Expert Summoner passive will now only work with permanent pets, so using the Arcanist ultimate, or the Ball of Lightning ability, will no longer briefly increase your max health. Next up we have Necromancer tank, with changes to Ghostly Embrace. The first area of this ability is now guaranteed to apply Shield, so it can replace Pulsar. And you won't even need a charge staff to keep up Minor Brittle in Trash. It'll just have to be an ice staff. The last area will generate a corpse if it hits an enemy, so it can be a really nice boost to our ultimate generation of necrotic potency. Moving on to Arcanist tank. In previous rune words, damage shield after the 1 second window is reduced by 56%, so it now scales to 13.2% of your max HP, rather than 30%. The dev comment says, "We're introducing a new case on this morph that results in a portion of the total shield strength becoming front-loaded, rather than giving a standard-sized shield if the primary one doesn't break. Our goal is to retain the feeling of being able to shrug off a tremendous amount of damage, akin to something like a parry, while ensuring the ability has a trade-off, so if you miss the activation window, it's weaker than the safer morph option." And I completely agree with Zos on this one. In previous rune word was overpowered, and I'm glad they're instead leaning into making it more like a parry ability, rather than just straight up nerfing it by, like, let's say 20%. If you're playing correctly, you won't even feel this nerf that much. Next up we have a nerf to the Rune Guard of Freedom. This morph will now only heal you for 15% of your max HP, rather than 30%. But instead, it will grant 300 more armor, and the armor and CC immunity it provides will last 7 seconds instead of 6. I mean, it's a really stupid change, but nothing to really fret about. We're just going to only ever use the other morph, Rune Guard of Still Waters. The morph choice on this one was already pretty irrelevant. One morph gave you a snare, while the other sometimes gave you CC immunity. You can't even really say it gives you any armor, because you can't balance your armor around a buff that lasts 6 seconds on a 30-second cooldown. You need 33k armor at all times in the more difficult fights. So whenever this short buff would proc, it would just go over the armor cap anyway. So now, instead of having to choose between snare or occasional CC immunity, we only have one choice, the snare morph. A really stupid and pointless change, but won't change much. Next up we have the Banner Bearer Scribing ability. I already made a video about it, criticizing its design because it's a toggleable ability that has to be double barred, which essentially makes you play with only 4 skills on each bar. There were quite a few really stupid takes in the comments under that video, lots of people saying it's going to be a healer ability. It was honestly painful to read, and it's baffling how confident people can be while being utterly incorrect. There is no way a healer can fit this ability on their bars, and also position well with it in most fights. Anyone telling you otherwise probably just didn't try any of the harder content. Which is fine, but it would be nice if they stopped spreading the bullshit misinformation. Any endgame healer is going to tell you the same. They can't fit this ability on their bars. Like, healers are even less likely to be able to use it than tanks. Instead, the most optimal way to use it seems to be putting it on an Arcanist damage dealer. And since now PTS is up, we could also check other scripts, and they further reinforce this idea. The class script grants 1 crux every 5 seconds when used with Banner, so the Arcanist DD who's going to use the Banner isn't really going to lose out on that much DPS to support the group. Cavalier's Charge signature script is also an interesting one, as it grants you weapon and spell damage based on your bonus movement speed, so it might be worth it instead of the crux generating one if you have an Ablade healer in your group providing major expedition with refreshing path, or if you're a Bosmer roleplayer. Also, keep in mind you can only benefit from a single banner, you can't stack them. And as the last thing, we have a new medium item set, Shared Pain. This set reflects damage to attackers whenever their dots tick on you, and it reduces your dot damage taken by 8%. Though I don't think the 8% value is high enough to make it worth it, even when you're going purely for survival. And that's it for this video. If you have any more questions, you can comment down below, or join our Discord server Wildheart. As always, feedback will be appreciated. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to my channel and check out my Twitch. Thanks for watching and see you next time.